I walked into the conference room and saw them all sitting there. My husband, my younger brother, my husband's sister, and the two investors who had been with us from day one. They were arranged around the table like a tribunal. My stomach dropped. "What's going on?" I asked, setting down my laptop bag. I had just landed from Seattle after 3 days at the AWS Summit, where I had presented our platform architecture to 5,000 developers. I was exhausted. My feet ached from standing in heels, and I had a splitting headache from the flight delay. "Margaret, sit down," my husband David said. He didn't stand up. He didn't smile. His voice had that clipped, corporate tone he used when he was about to fire someone. I stayed standing. Why wasn't I notified about this meeting? I'm the CTO. I should have been on the calendar invite. "That's what we need to discuss," said Karen, my husband's sister. She was sitting in my usual chair, the one at the head of the table where I always sat during technical reviews. She wore a smug little smile and a designer blazer that looked suspiciously like the one I had been missing from my closet. "Maggie, please sit," my brother Paul said. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Paul, who I had put through Stanford. Paul, who would still be writing code for minimum wage in some basement if I hadn't made him VP of product at DataStream, the company I had built from nothing. I pulled out a chair and sat. My heart was hammering. "Someone tell me what's happening. Is it the investors? Did we lose funding?" "No, nothing like that," Thomas, our lead investor, said. He shuffled some papers uncomfortably. "Actually, Margaret, this is about the direction of the company. We've been discussing some concerns about your leadership style." Leadership style. I had heard those words before. They were code. They meant, "You're a woman, and we don't like how you do things." "I just delivered the keynote at AWS Summit," I said slowly. "I closed the partnership with Microsoft. I increased our system efficiency by 40%. What concerns could you possibly have?" David cleared his throat. "Margaret, you're brilliant. Nobody's questioning your technical abilities. But building a company requires more than just good code. It requires vision, flexibility, the ability to move fast and take risks. We have vision," I said. "We have a roadmap. We have 3 major clients signed for Q2. "We could have 30 major clients," Karen interrupted. Her voice was sharp. "If you weren't so obsessed with perfect architecture, if you didn't block every aggressive move we try to make. David has been trying to scale, but you keep saying no to everything." I looked at my husband. "Is that what you think? That I'm blocking growth?" He spread his hands. "Sweetheart, you have to admit, you're risk-averse. You want everything tested 100 times. You won't let us move until every edge case is covered. But we're in tech. We need to move fast and break things." "We need to move correctly," I said. My voice was shaking now. "If we scale before the infrastructure is ready, we'll have outages. We'll lose clients. We'll destroy 5 years of work. Or we'll capture market share and worry about technical debt later," Paul said. My brother, looking at me like I was the problem. "Paul, you know better than this," I said. "You were there when the database crashed in year 2 because we scaled too fast. You were the one pulling all-nighters fixing the cascade failures." "That was 3 years ago," Paul said. "Things are different now. We have more resources. And honestly, Maggie, I think I'm ready to take on more responsibility. I've been learning. I can handle the technical side." The room tilted. "What are you saying?" David leaned forward. "Margaret, we've decided to restructure. We're offering you a consulting position. Very generous package. 6 months severance, benefits, and a small equity stake. But we need someone in the CTO role who can move at startup speed. Paul is going to take over as Chief Technology Officer." The words landed like physical blows. I looked around the table. At David, my husband of 15 years. At Karen, who I had hired against my better judgment because she needed a job. At Paul, who I had raised after our parents died. At the investors, who were staring at the table like cowards. "You're firing me," I said quietly. "You're firing me from the company I built." "We're restructuring," Thomas said, not looking up. "It's a mutual decision. We've already drawn up the paperwork." "Mutual?" I let out a short, harsh laugh. "I wasn't even in the room for this decision." "How is it mutual?" "Because you're going to sign," Karen said. She slid a folder across the table. "David's already consulted with legal. If you fight this, it gets ugly. There are performance concerns." There are complaints from the engineering team about your management style. We'd hate to have to make those public. I opened the folder with shaking hands. The severance agreement was already printed, already dated. They had planned this. While I was in Seattle, talking about our architecture, showing slides with my name on them, they were here planning my execution. How long? I asked David. How long have you been planning to get rid of me? He had the decency to look uncomfortable. It's not like that, Maggie. How long? 6 months, Karen answered for him, ever since the acquisition talks started. Acquisition talks. I sat up straight. What acquisition talks? See, this is the problem, David said. You're so buried in code that you don't see the big picture. We've been in negotiations with TechCore Corporation. They want to buy DataStream, $300 million. But they want a company that's primed for scaling, not one that's obsessed with architectural purity. $300 million. For the company I had coded in our garage. For the platform I had designed on napkins at 2 a.m. while David slept. For the infrastructure I had built with my own hands. And you didn't think to tell me? I asked. Your wife? Your co-founder? You would have said no, Paul said. You always say no to acquisition offers. You said no to Google. You said no to Amazon. This is our shot, Maggie. This is generational wealth. And what's my cut? I asked. In this $300 million deal? David and Karen exchanged a look. About $4 million, David said. Based on your current equity stake, the severance package bumps that to $5 million. That's more money than you ever imagined having, Margaret. You should be grateful. $5 million. Out of 300. I had built the entire technical foundation. I held the patents. I had written 80% of the core code base, and they were offering me $5 million while they walked away with the rest. I looked at the signature line on the agreement. My hand moved toward the pen, and then I stopped. I looked at David. Really looked at him. At the expensive watch he was wearing, the one I hadn't bought him. At the guilty flush on his face. At Karen's triumphant smirk. No, I said. I stood up. I'm not signing this. Margaret, be reasonable, Thomas said. If you fight this, the company suffers. The acquisition falls through. Everyone loses. Then everyone loses, I said. I picked up my laptop bag. Because I'm not giving you my company. I walked toward the door. David stood up. Maggie, don't make this ugly. We've already moved your desk out of your office. Your accounts have been suspended pending the transition. Just sign the papers and make this easy. I turned around, suspended my accounts. They had locked me out already. They had erased me before I even landed from Seattle. You know what's funny? I said. My voice was calm, deadly calm. You think you can run DataStream without me. You think because Paul learned some Python that he can replicate what I built. You think because David can pitch to investors that he understands the architecture. We have the code base, Karen said. We have the documentation. We'll figure it out. Do you? I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Good luck with that. I walked out of the conference room, through the open plan office where my engineers were typing away, oblivious to the coup that had just happened. I walked out of the building I had secured the lease for, past the logo I had designed, into the parking garage where my car was waiting. I got in. I closed the door, and I let myself shake for exactly 60 seconds. Then I pulled out my phone and opened my private repository. The one that wasn't on the company GitHub. The one that David and Paul didn't know existed. Because they had forgotten something crucial. They had forgotten that I wasn't just the CTO who wrote clean code and insisted on testing. I was the architect. And architects always leave themselves a way back in. I drove home, my mind spinning. I needed to think. I needed to understand the full scope of what they had done. I needed to see how deep the betrayal went. Our house in Palo Alto was silent when I pulled into the driveway. It was 2 p.m. on a Thursday. David's car was gone. That was strange. He had been in the office meeting. Where would he go after? I unlocked the door and walked inside. And I stopped. The living room had been rearranged. The couch I had picked out was gone, replaced by something modern and uncomfortable looking. There were new throw pillows, new curtains, new artwork on the walls. My family photos had been taken down. Hello? I called out. Footsteps came from upstairs. Karen appeared at the top of the staircase. She was wearing a bathrobe. My bathrobe. "Oh," she said. "You're back early. David said you'd go somewhere to think." I stared at her. "What are you doing in my house?" "My house now," Karen said. She came down the stairs. "Didn't David tell you? He filed for divorce last week. I'm moving in. We've been together for 8 months, Margaret. It's time to stop pretending." The floor seemed to drop out from under me. 8 months. I know, it's complicated. Karen examined her nails. They were painted the same shade of red I always wore. "But you were never really present in the marriage, were you? Always working, always obsessing over your precious code." David needed someone who actually saw him as a person, not a business partner. I couldn't breathe. My husband, his sister, 8 months. While I was building, while I was working, while I was trusting. "Where is he now?" I asked. "Lawyer's office," Karen said. "Setting up the asset division. Don't worry, you'll get something. The prenup is pretty clear. You get the car, some savings, maybe the condo in Tahoe. David gets the house, the primary investments, his equity stake in DataStream. Fair's fair." Fair? Nothing about this was fair. "And Paul?" I asked. "My brother? Was he in on this too?" Karen shrugged. "Paul's broke, Margaret. You know that. You kept him on a tight leash, controlling his stock options, making him feel like an employee instead of a partner. David offered him a real stake. 20% of the company once you're out, plus a salary that's actually competitive. What did you expect him to do?" I turned around. I walked back to my car. I didn't trust myself to stay in that house for another second. I got in, started the engine, and drove. I didn't know where I was going. I just drove until I found myself in a parking lot at a strip mall in San Jose, staring at a Starbucks sign. I went inside. I ordered a black coffee with shaking hands. I sat in the corner booth and I opened my laptop, and I started to work. First, I checked my bank accounts. Our joint account drained down to $500. My personal savings, frozen, with a note that said, "Pending litigation hold." My investment account, liquidated, with the proceeds transferred somewhere I couldn't see. I had $320 in an old checking account I had opened in college and never closed. That was my net worth right now. Then I checked my company email. Access denied, my Slack account suspended, my GitHub access to the company repositories revoked. They had executed a total lockout. David had been planning this meticulously. He had used my trip to Seattle as the opportunity to move against me. He probably thought I would be too shocked, too devastated, too exhausted to fight back. He was wrong. I opened my private AWS account, the one I paid for with my old credit card, the one that still had the core infrastructure I had built in the early days before we moved everything to the company cloud. I logged in with my biometric authentication. Access granted. And there it was, the original codebase, the one I had written in our garage before David even came up with the company name, the one I had migrated to the company repositories but had kept backed up because I never fully trusted cloud storage. I looked at the file structure, 90,000 lines of code, the recommendation engine, the data processing pipeline, the security layer, all of it in my handwriting, metaphorically speaking. All of it carrying my Git commits, my comments, my coding style. And then I looked at the company production environment, using a backdoor administrative account I had set up years ago for emergency access. It was still active. David hadn't found it. Why would he? He had never understood the infrastructure well enough to know what to look for. I examined the production code. It was a mess. Over the past 6 months, while I was being sidelined from decisions, Paul had been making changes. Bad changes. He had introduced memory leaks. He had broken the caching layer. He had hard-coded values that should have been configurable. The system was running, but it was running on duct tape and prayers. And then I found it. The authentication service. The piece of the system that verified users, that handled security tokens, that kept everything locked down. Paul had rewritten parts of it, but he had kept the original dependency on a library I had written. A custom authentication library that lived in my private repository. The system was pulling that library from my private package manager. If I removed access to that package, the authentication service would fail on the next deployment, or the next server restart, or the next time they tried to scale. I sat back. I sipped my coffee. I thought about what they had done. David's betrayal, Karen's cruelty, Paul's weakness. They had stolen my company. They had stolen my marriage. They had locked me out and offered me scraps. But they had made one critical mistake. They had assumed that because they could access the code, they owned it. They had forgotten that code is a living thing. It has dependencies. It has connections. It has a creator who knows every hidden vulnerability. I made a decision. I wasn't going to crash their system immediately. That would be too quick, too obvious. I was going to let them think they had won. Let them move forward with the acquisition. Let them get comfortable. And then, at exactly the right moment, I was going to pull the foundation out from under them. But first, I needed to cover my bases legally. I needed a lawyer, not just any lawyer. I needed someone who understood both family law and intellectual property. Someone who could move fast. I made a call to Catherine Torres, a lawyer I had met at a Women in Tech conference 3 years ago. She had given me her card and told me to call if I ever needed help. I never thought I would. "Catherine Torres," she answered on the second ring. "Catherine, this is Margaret Chen. We met at the Grace Hopper conference. You told me to call if I ever needed help." "Margaret, of course I remember. What's going on?" "My husband is divorcing me, stealing my company, and I have 72 hours before they close an acquisition that will lock me out permanently. I need a shark. Are you available?" There was a pause. Then, "I'll be at my office in 20 minutes. Get here and bring everything. Every email, every document, every shred of evidence you have." I drove to Catherine's office in Palo Alto. She was a tiny woman with steel gray hair and eyes like lasers. She listened to my story without interrupting. Then she pulled up the divorce filing on her computer. "He filed in Santa Clara County," she said. "Standard California community property divorce. He's claiming irreconcilable differences and requesting the house, the primary assets, and sole ownership of his data stream equity. He's offering you $2 million as a settlement." "$2 million?" I said. "He told me 5. "He lied," Catherine said flatly. "And look at this. He's filed for a restraining order against you accessing company property, claiming you made threats during the meeting today." "I didn't threaten anyone." "Doesn't matter. It's on paper now. He's building a narrative. Unstable wife, difficult employee. He's trying to make it impossible for you to fight back." "Can he do that?" "He can try," Catherine said. "But here's what he doesn't know. California law is very clear about intellectual property created during a marriage. If you can prove you wrote the core code, that you hold the original patents, that you are the primary creator of the company's value, then you have a claim to far more than $2 million. She pulled up another screen. "And look at this. The company was incorporated using a standard template. The equity distribution shows David as majority shareholder, but that's just because he filed the paperwork. The actual value creation? That's all you. We can challenge this. But the acquisition," I said. "They're trying to close it before I can fight back." "Then we file an injunction," Catherine said. "We go to court tomorrow and we get a judge to freeze the acquisition until the divorce and company ownership is settled. It'll buy us time. They'll be furious." "Good," Catherine said. "Let them be furious. Fury makes people sloppy. Now, tell me about the code. Can they run the company without you?" I smiled. "No, they can't. They think they can, but there are dependencies they don't know about. Within 30 days, their system is going to start failing." Catherine leaned back. 30 days. That's perfect. That's enough time for them to feel confident, enough time for the acquisition due diligence to start, and then when things crash, TechCore will pull out. Can you document these dependencies? Can you prove you control them? "I can prove every line of code is mine," I said. "I have Git commit histories. I have design documents. I have emails where I'm explaining technical concepts to Paul because he didn't understand them." "Then we have a case," Catherine said. "Here's what we're going to do. Tomorrow, we file for an emergency hearing. We present evidence that you are the primary IP creator and that the company cannot function without your contributions. We get the acquisition frozen, and then we negotiate from a position of strength." "What about David?" I asked. "What about the divorce?" "The divorce is secondary," Catherine said. "First, we secure your company, then we deal with your cheating husband." I left Catherine's office feeling something I hadn't felt since I walked into that conference room. I felt hope. And I felt anger. Cold, calculated anger. That night, I stayed in a hotel in Mountain View. A cheap place, because I only had $300 to my name. I couldn't use credit cards. Everything was frozen. I ate instant ramen from a convenience store, and I worked on my laptop, building the evidence package Catherine needed. My phone buzzed constantly. David calling, Paul calling, Karen texting. I ignored all of them. At 11 p.m., a new text came through. It was from my daughter, Sophie. She was 16, away at boarding school in Connecticut. We had sent her there because she wanted to study music, and Choate had the best program. Mom, Dad called me. He says you're having a breakdown. He says you quit your job and you're not thinking clearly. Are you okay? Should I come home? My heart clenched. Of course David would try to turn Sophie against me. Of course he would paint me as unstable. I called her. She answered immediately. Mom? Hi, sweetheart. I'm okay. I'm not having a breakdown. But Dad and I are having some problems, and I need you to trust me right now. Can you do that? What kind of problems? The kind where adults make bad choices and hurt each other. Dad is trying to take something from me. Something I built. I'm fighting back. It might get ugly. But I need you to know I'm okay. There was a long silence. Is he cheating on you? Smart girl, yes. With who? I hesitated. Aunt Karen. That bitch, Sophie said. The venom in her voice surprised me. I knew something was weird. Last time I was home, she was wearing your clothes. She was acting like she lived there. Mom, I'm so sorry. It's not your fault, baby. Are you going to be okay? Do you need money? I have some saved up from my summer job. No, sweetheart, keep your money. I'm going to be fine. I just need you to focus on school and your cello. And if Dad calls you again and says things about me, remember that I love you and I would never abandon you. Okay? Okay, Mom. I love you. I love you too. I hung up. And I cried. Not from sadness, from fury. Because David had tried to turn my daughter against me. He had tried to poison the one pure relationship I had left. That was his second mistake. The next morning, Catherine and I walked into Santa Clara County Superior Court. We had filed an emergency motion at 8 a.m. By 10 a.m., we were in front of Judge Rebecca Hammond. David was there with his lawyer, a slick corporate type named James Riley. They both looked surprised to see me with representation. Your Honor, Catherine began, we're here to request an immediate injunction against the proposed acquisition of DataStream Technologies. My client, Margaret Chen, is the primary intellectual property creator of the company. She holds critical code repositories, design patents, and system architecture knowledge that makes her essential to the company's function. The proposed acquisition is being rushed through in an attempt to dilute her rightful ownership claim. This is absurd, Riley said. Mrs. Chen was relieved of her duties due to performance concerns. She's a disgruntled employee trying to sabotage a legitimate business deal. Then let's examine the evidence, Catherine said. She pulled up her laptop, connected it to the court display. This is the Git repository history for DataStream's core codebase. As you can see, 92% of commits are authored by Margaret Chen. The original copyright on the recommendation engine, filed by Margaret Chen. The patents on the data processing pipeline, Margaret Chen, filed 3 years before the company was incorporated. The judge leaned forward, examining the screen. Furthermore, Catherine continued, the company's current CTO, Paul Chen, has only been programming for 4 years. He was hired by his sister and has no formal computer science education. The proposed replacement is not qualified to maintain the systems Margaret built. Objection, Riley said. This is character assassination. It's fact, Catherine said. And here's another fact. The company's authentication system relies on a private library maintained by Margaret Chen in her personal repository. If she revokes access to that library, the entire platform becomes non-functional. David's face went white. He leaned over to whisper to his lawyer. Judge Hammond looked at me. Mrs. Chen, do you control critical infrastructure for this company? I stood. Yes, Your Honor. I built the company from the ground up. I own the original source code. I maintain private repositories that the current production system depends on. Without my cooperation, DataStream cannot function. This is extortion, Riley said. No, Judge Hammond said. This is a woman protecting her intellectual property. Mr. Riley. Why was Mrs. Chen removed from her position so abruptly? Performance issues, Your Honor. Management concerns. After she delivered a keynote at the AWS Summit 3 days ago, after she closed a partnership with Microsoft, that's quite convenient timing, right before a $300 million acquisition. Riley had no answer. Here's what's going to happen, Judge Hammond said. I'm granting a temporary injunction. The acquisition is frozen for 90 days. During that time, both parties will undergo mediation to determine the true ownership structure of DataStream Technologies. Mrs. Chen will not be barred from company property. Her access will be restored, and if I find out that Mr. Chen or anyone else has been destroying evidence or manipulating the company structure, there will be consequences. Do I make myself clear? Yes, Your Honor, Catherine said. David looked like he wanted to vomit. We walked out of the courthouse. David tried to approach me in the parking lot. Maggie, this is insane, he said. You're destroying the company. You're destroying our chance at generational wealth. Your chance, I said. You were going to give me $5 million out of $300. You were going to give me 2% of what I built. That's still more money than you ever dreamed of. You slept with your sister, I said. You betrayed me with Karen, and you tried to turn Sophie against me. You don't get to lecture me about what's reasonable. Karen and I are in love, David said. It just happened. You were always working, always unavailable. What did you expect? I looked at him. This man I had spent 15 years with. This man I had trusted, and I felt nothing. No love, no pain, just cold clarity. I expected loyalty, I said. I expected partnership. I expected you to be half the person I thought you were. But you're not. You're just a salesman who got lucky that he married an engineer. I got in my car, I drove away, and I didn't look back. Over the next 30 days, I watched DataStream start to crumble. First, there were small issues. The authentication service started throwing intermittent errors. Then the caching layer began to degrade. The system slowed down. Response times increased. Customers started complaining. Paul tried to fix it. He brought in consultants. He had the engineering team working around the clock, but he couldn't find the problem because the problem was architecture. It was in the foundation I had built, the dependencies I had created, the connections only I fully understood. On day 28, there was a major outage. The entire platform went down for 6 hours. TechCore Corporation called an emergency meeting. They demanded answers. David tried to blame it on bad luck, on a vendor issue, on anything but the truth. But TechCore had their own engineers. They had been doing due diligence, and they had discovered the same thing Judge Hammond had discovered. The company didn't work without me. On day 30, TechCore pulled out of the acquisition. $300 million gone. David called me, screaming. Are you happy now? You destroyed everything. You sabotaged us. I didn't sabotage anything, I said calmly. I just stopped holding it together. Turns out, without me, you have nothing. I'll sue you for damages. You can try, I said, but you'll lose. Because Catherine has something very interesting. She has emails from Karen to you, discussing how to force me out. She has text messages from Paul about manipulating the board. And she has evidence that you've been siphoning company funds to pay for your affair. Embezzlement, David. That's a felony. Silence on the other end. So here's what's going to happen, I said. We're going to mediation, and you're going to agree to give me majority ownership of DataStream, 75%. You and Paul can split the remaining 25%. You're going to step down as CEO, and you're going to give me the house in the divorce. That's insane. Or I go to the SEC with evidence of your embezzlement. I go to the IRS with evidence of your tax fraud, and I watch you go to prison. Your choice. He hung up. 2 weeks later, we sat in mediation. David, Paul, Karen, the investors, Catherine, and me. The mediator laid out the options. Fight in court for years, destroying all value, or settle now and salvage what was left. I'll agree to 50-50, David said. Split ownership. We both walk away with something. 75-25, I said. Take it or I walk, and you can explain to TechCore and every other potential acquirer why your platform is held together with duct tape. This is extortion. This is negotiation, Catherine said. My client built this company. My client owns the intellectual property. My client is being generous by letting you keep anything at all. The investors backed me. They had done the math. A company with me was worth something. A company without me was worth nothing. David signed. Paul signed. I walked out of that conference room with 75% ownership of DataStream Technologies. That night, Sophie called me. Mom, Dad told me you stole his company. I took back what was mine, I said. How do you feel about that? I feel like Dad's a liar and you're a badass, she said. When can I come home? I want to see you. Christmas break, I said. We'll have the house to ourselves. Your dad is moving out. 6 months later, I stood on a stage at TechCrunch Disrupt. I had rebuilt DataStream's executive team. I had fixed the infrastructure Paul had broken. I had secured new funding at a valuation of $400 million. The interviewer asked me about the story, about the coup, the betrayal, the comeback. The tech industry has a saying, I said, move fast and break things. But I learned something different. Build it right the first time. Build it so well that they can't function without you. And never, ever forget where you buried the back doors. The audience laughed. They applauded. They didn't know the full story. They didn't need to. After the talk, I checked my phone. There was an email from Paul. The subject line read, I'm sorry. I deleted it without reading. He had made his choice. He had chosen money over family. He didn't get forgiveness just because he regretted it. There was also a text from David. Karen left me. She said I'm broke and boring. I made a mistake. Can we talk? I blocked his number. And there was a message from Sophie. Mom, I got first chair in the orchestra. Wish you were here. I smiled. I texted back. I'm so proud of you. I'll be at your winter concert, front row. Because that's what mattered. Not revenge, not money, not proving anything to people who had betrayed me. What mattered was building something real, something solid, something that would last. And I had built it. Twice. First the company, then myself. Thank you for listening to my story. I know it's not easy to talk about betrayal, especially when it comes from the people closest to you. But if my journey can help even one person stand up for themselves, stand up for what they built, then it was worth reliving. Family isn't always blood. Family is the people who see your value and celebrate it, not the ones who exploit it. If you're holding on to someone who's hurting you, let them go. You're stronger than you think. If you enjoyed this story, please hit the like button and subscribe. Tell me in the comments. Have you ever had to fight for something you built? How did you find the strength? I read every comment, and I'd love to hear your story. Until next time, stay strong, stay smart, and never let anyone steal your code.